Hey guys, bringing you another knife review. I know I'm taking that from someone else, but I think it's appropriate here because this is going to sit right here the entire video. Bringing you a knife review of, I'm a Knife's Tale, and I'm bringing you a knife review of this TRM Bulldog. And yeah, this is a USA made crossbar lock that is... Let's just start off by saying it's good. I am going to finish this review up by saying that I'm going to be giving this knife away. I'm going to put up a second video that is the giveaway video with all of the instructions, so watch that, do what you need to do. And if you get drawn, I'm going to put all the names in a hat, and if you get drawn, you're going to win this knife. A USA made. Yeah. TRM, that was my fault. Which is a pretty good giveaway, in my opinion. This is a $220 knife. Yeah, this is my first giveaway, too. TRM was nice enough to send this in, to let me review and give away, and my word, that is awesome. Let's just say that for the beginning. TRM is a very great company. I've heard nothing but good about them. I've heard other people say they've had nothing but good interactions with them. TRM giving a new reviewer like me a shot and sending a $200 and some knife to give away. Yes, win all day long. But let's get to the knife. But before that, like and subscribe if you would. You're gonna need to if you want to win this thing. Alright, so what are we looking at here? We're looking at a drop point blade with a very low tip and accessible. In true TRM fashion, very similar to their other blade shapes. We're looking at a high flat grind. Again, I love the TRM logo that they put on the blades. I don't know why, I just like the look of that. It's their logo, but for some reason it looks good on the blade. This knife is made in the USA in 20 CV, and TRM does a good job with their 20 CV. This particular variant is in black G10. They do offer, as normal, multiple different variants when these knives are available, which not always. TRM's a smaller company. They make knives that sell out quickly because they're popular and good. And this knife is no exception to that. This is the base one in the black G10. Very textured. Feels a lot like Spyderco kind of G10. Got a pocket clip, deep carry that is... even back here is pretty reasonably comfortable. Like, I mean, this is not, you feel it, but it is comfortable. You go up here, you basically start to lose it a little bit. It is very comfortable, which we will talk about in ergos, but just a general overlook. This knife is running on an access lock, which could have been a bad thing, but not in this case, which we'll get to in a moment, once we're done specs, which we'll jump to right now. Specs of the Bulldog. Furthest point on the scale. This knife has a, I'm going to call that a 2.85 inch blade. It's a little more, it's over 2 7/8. It's under 3 inch, so it's somewhere in between there. The overall length on this knife is about 7 1/8. And the handle is about 4 1/8, maybe just a tiny bit over. So yeah, that about right. Under 2 1/8. I mean 2.9 for the blade, 4 1/8. Yeah, that's about right. Good, math is mathing. We're already off to a good start. Comparisons to my Civivi Conspirator and my Civivi Elementum small full-size knife comparisons. As you can see, this knife is just a hair longer overall than the Elementum, just barely. I mean, it's just coming on from, if I don't know if you can see it because it's on an angle, but it's just coming over this line here while the Civivi Elementum falls just short of it. It's definitely a small knife. Not a super small knife or like a mini carry, but it's a small knife. But it kind of doesn't perform or feel like one. It doesn't feel like a full-size knife, mind you, but it doesn't feel like a small knife. Profile. As you can see, it's about as tall as the Conspirator, though not with without the flipper tab, of course. It is just a little bit thicker than the Elementum. Thinner than the Conspirator. So honestly, it's very similar overall to the Elementum, except it's just a bit taller. There it is. Calipers. Why do they do that all the time? Okay. It's screwing with me. I think that's zeroed out, yeah. 459,000. So yeah, this is pretty thin. The Elementum is like on the lower end of 450,000. So yeah, it's pretty comparable. Blade stock is a mighty 120 thousandths, which is, I think, the thickest knife that TRM. Oh no, I'm pretty much positive this is the thickest knife TRM does, which says something. They do thin blades. They are purpose-driven knives in every way, shape, or form. Behind the edge, on the... No, don't slide up the edge. I said behind the edge. 15 thousandths on this knife? 15 thousandths by the looks of it. Oh, I hit the camera. Yeah, I think that's about right. 15 thousandths. So, not the super slicer that, say, like the Atom is. It's a little bit thicker behind the edge, just a little bit, with a slightly thicker blade stock, but that makes it more of an all-around user instead of just being a super slicer. And this is still a great cutter. I mean, it's almost a full flat grind. I have cut with it. I'm going to clean this knife up before I give it away, no problem. And I suppose it doesn't need it, but I will offer if you want me to put a new edge on it. This thing is still sharp. It's performed well. I haven't beaten on it because I knew I was giving it away, but I have used it as I needed to for the review. And honestly, it's done great for the 20CV, and it's definitely a good cutter. And again, TRM definitely seems to be focused on that. Their knives are very purpose-driven. They have just their geometry and everything is specific. It's not just sort of a universal knife, but this one is pretty close to it. Let us check the hardware. I think I have to get the right bit. That is, in fact, the right bit. T8. And T... Okay, now I'm confused. For some reason I thought that was a T8 pivot. It's a T10 pivot. Okay, T10 pivot. That seems like a T10 pivot. Hold on a second. Yeah, T10 pivot. And the rest is T6. I don't like seeing that, but these are pretty deeply machined. I don't think you're going to have that much of a problem. The pocket clip ones aren't quite as deeply machined as they could be. I'd like to see that be a T8. It's, at least on the pocket clips. I mean, I don't mind this like liner holding screws here. But yeah. I'd like to see that be a little bit different on the pocket clip at least. Especially if you're going to do T10, you're sort of like emphasizing the difference. Not my favorite thing, but not a reversible pocket clip either, which is interesting considering axis locks are super ambidextrous. Maybe they make a lefty version of this knife. This is a relatively new addition to their lineup, so I'm not sure why it's not tapped for left-hand carry. That is, I guess, a weakness, and I'm gonna have to detract some points for it because it's such an ambidextrous knife in every other way. But it is what it is. There's not much I can do about it. I'm also a little confused by how this knife is actually holding itself together. The pocket clip screws, and you can actually see them right there. So there must be, yeah, okay. So there must be another screw in the underlying liner, which is pretty mounted deep in there. You can just see them. That is attached to the backspacer holding this knife apart together, and then the scales just mount over that. So theoretically, the scales on this knife should be extremely swappable, which with the Atom and the Neutron and all of TRM's other knives, I think, they are pretty swappable, the scales. They're designed to be that. You take the pivot out, take these off, and the scale should pop right off, and you should be able to switch it because there's underlying structure holding the knife together. I wasn't sure they were going to be able to manage that on this particular kind of knife, being axis bar lock, but it looks like they are, so you could probably just change out scales, which is great to see. Wonderful to see, in fact, because who doesn't like just being able to customize their knives a little bit? And seeing that it's been made easy is pretty great. Not so much on the non-swappable, but I wonder if they sell left-handed scales. The knife is tapped for left-handed carry. There are holes over there for the pocket clip on this side of the knife. So they probably sell left-handed scales. Which... yeah, okay, so then it probably is left-hand friendly. You just have to get the right scales for it. Interesting. Interesting way to do that. I got completely lost in that. Finish up specs. Shut up, you fool. Get to the rest of the knife. 3.5 ounces. Not an ounce an inch, but close and not in any way, shape, or form heavy. Oh, I forgot to bring this back. Idiot. That's me. Alright. Let's start at the back end of this knife, because we were just talking about the pocket clip. Pocket clip is deep carry. Screws are, as I said, I wish they were T8s, but they are flush mounted. Good enough room. Good retention. Not too stiff, but definitely good. This is also a titanium clip, if I remember correctly, based on what I looked into. Yes, titanium clip. The liners are steel. The blade is, of course, steel. It's not pulling to that super hard. Why is that? The access bar buttons might be titanium as well, because there was not much pull to them. It was pull to underneath them. So, that's a thing. So, titanium clip. Geared G10 backspacer. Well, is that a geared G10 backspacer? I don't know. It's a G10 backspacer on G10 scales. This knife is basically perfectly centered. It's pretty much perfectly centered. There is no play. Hold on. No. Okay, yeah. I just slowly tapped it out there, and it's like, no. I think I was hitting the button, or the bar. There is no play in any direction. The blade is centered 100%. We have a hole for deployment here that it's a bit small, but I mean, it's a small knife. Works pretty well, honestly. Even under the camera, that is not hard. There is a good amount of force to be overcome, and there's a definitive pop when you overcome it. And as soon as you do, it's a little bit tighter than maybe it necessarily has to be for this part running here, because you can feel the bearings and you can feel the bar hitting and pressing into it, which, I mean, you kind of feel on most access locks. But this overcoming right there is pretty solid and makes for a really satisfying access bar lock. Like, this feels like it has a detent. This does not feel particularly mushy. This is one of the better access bar locks I felt. I still consider Kaiser to pretty much have the best ones. They're super consistent on, say, like the drop bear. This is really close. This is really good to see. I can't understate that. I mean, Microtech's thing, mushy. Benchmade's mushy. The USA-made ones have been falling behind in that regard. This gives me hope. This is really well done. It's not only that, but yeah, I mean, the bearings are super good. Take the pressure off, and it is very, very smooth and dropping. They did a really good job with this access bar, or a crossbar. I can't say long-term whether you're going to have a problem with the springs. I mean, that seems to be like an issue with most of them. But I imagine if you do, TRM probably would cover you. I mean, I can't imagine they wouldn't be willing to cover a spring mess-up in one of their knives. And it probably should be pretty easy to change because the scales can pop off pretty easily. So, plus there, too. So, now that we've gotten past the blade, I mean the handle, finally. Oh, I will say, this is weird, and it kind of gives it character. This knife, it looks like the liners are supposed to be bronzed. They seem to be bronzed inside. But a little of the bronze is worn off on this one side. You can still see bits of it. And that's how this knife came. It's like slightly blued instead of just pure bronze. I thought it would bother me seeing it, honestly, for the first time. It doesn't. It kind of adds character. It's just like, yeah, okay, fine, sure, have fun with that. That's just me. It's not a big deal. But they do seem to be bronzed on the inside, so it looks like this maybe just got a slightly different heat or something, because it's bluish bronze. Making our way to the blade. Plunge grind is back here. You're not going to have any problem with that whatsoever. The blade is quite sharp. The bevels seem to be pretty darn close from side to side. Maybe a tiny bit larger at the very tip there, but everything else is pretty uniform. 20 CV is performed and held up well. I like TRM Stonewash. It's not quite as reflective as some, but it is good looking. It does not show fingerprints. Ergos. Back here, you feel the clip, but it's not uncomfortable. I could definitely use this knife back here. Of course, this knife is small, but I still get a 4-finger grip, which is nice. Choked up is clearly where this knife is meant to be used. It is even more comfortable. It is super comfortable in the hand. The only complaint I have is I kind of wish that, as you can see, the grind lifts up a little bit on both sides towards the heel of the blade. I kind of wish this blade termination was out. Maybe, I don't know, let's see. 60 to 70 thousandths further out on the blade, because this is a little bit tight here. I'm a little bit, for my fingers, large size glove, my fingers are stubby, but they're not super thin, like they're not long twigs. I fit in this choil, but I kind of want to be a little bit further forward into this choil, but then I would definitely be into the blade edge. It works, it is comfortable for me. I would like to see just a little bit more. Like I said, 60 thousandths of an inch added on there, just take off 70 thousandths, something like that. Just knock off a little bit more up the blade to make that choil just a little more roomy. I mean, you can do that yourself. The plunge grind's back here. You're not really going to have an issue with it. I mean, but I would like to see it out of the factory that way. You can definitely grab this thing in a way that is comfortable and works and functional, that does not worry me. But I'd still like to see just a little bit more choil up there, because it's a little tight. The only other complaint, I think that's the only objective complaint that I have, because bigger people with bigger hands are going to be up there, and that's just not going to work for them. So if you're a big guy, you might not even want to enter like this giveaway, because yeah, unless you can confidently just mod the knife, which is no big deal, but yeah, if you're going to have big hands, this is going to be a little bit tight for you, which is unfortunate. Especially considering everything else on this knife is executed so darn well. I mean, I cannot stress enough, that is a fantastic execution of a crossbar lock. That is satisfying. That is literally top marks. 10 out of 10 crossbar lock for what I felt. Compared to what I felt, I mean, that's basically Kaiser level. And I use them as the example because they do a good job. The only other complaint I have, and I have this complaint, I think, with most TRM knives, other than maybe their titanium scales, they do chamfer it. But the actual edge, the edge that the whole thing goes into, is a little bit harder than it needs to be. I feel like it could be softened around. It's a little softer actually down here, but around parts of this knife, it's a little bit harder than it needs to be, and I could definitely use being sharpened. I felt the same way about my Atom. It's comfortable, it works, it's great, but it could use a little bit of softening, even just a touch of sandpaper along the edge. Just would knock this thing out of the park and soften it up just a tiny bit. That's a personal preference thing. Overall, the scales are very reminiscent of, as I said, Spyderco. They have a lot of texture, they have similar edges. Maybe Spydercos are a little bit more softened, but they're very comparable. Overall, and I'm taking a while here, this is a great knife. I'm glad to be able to say that because I'm giving it away and because they sent it to me for free. I'm very happy to be able to report back and say, yeah, you kind of did a great job here. It could be a little bit bigger or have a little bit more choil, but beyond that, this is a wonderful USA-made knife. And a wonderful execution of the crossbar lock that builds quite a bit of confidence that we can actually do better jobs on those things. Because that works well as I screw it up. Ah! Yeah. It's not hard. You can, of course, fail it if you're trying to. But out from underneath the camera, not a problem whatsoever, and it's just well done. Well done. Clap, clap, clap for TRM, because this is a good knife. And I really think that anybody who gets this, again, assuming they don't have gigantic hands where they can't go into this choil, is going to be pretty darn happy with this thing, because it functions, it performs. It's a good all-around smaller carry knife. And the way it's set up is, even though I'm not as far into the choil as maybe I want to be, the way the handle has you hold it with this sort of dropping grip, you kind of have no problem being away from the edge a little bit. So your hand sort of camps into an okay position. But again, soften those edges just a tiny bit. Other than that, no, this is great. I like this. I know that they have recently announced a titanium version of this knife. I am probably going to buy one if I can get one. Like, this is really good, and I would like to have this in my own knife collection and rotation, because this is a good user. Yeah. And that's what TRM does. They do good cutting, purpose-driven. They're usually very thin knives, very thin blade stock. I mean, even 120 thousandths. This is not thick. That perform, and this is no exception. It's just a little bit more universal than some of their super slicers. TRM Bulldog is excellent, and I'm going to be giving it away in a following up video. So keep your eyes out for that. And that's everything. It took a little bit longer than some of my reviews, but I think this warranted it. This is a really good knife. Good job, TRM and dog. He agrees. He agrees with their dog. Yes, good knife. In fact, this is one of their dogs. I know they have bulldogs too, because they demanded they get their own knife. Well, they did them right. That's all for me. Like and subscribe. Wait for that giveaway video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.